4 days ago, the most wanted drug lord in the Western Hemisphere was killed in a pre-dawn military raid in the mountains of Jalisco, Mexico. Within hours, cars were burning in 20 Mexican states. Guadalajara, Mexico's second-largest city, became a ghost town. Tourists in Puerto Vallarta sprinted through the airport as smoke rose over the beachfront hotels. Schools were shut down across multiple states. Flights were canceled. The U.S. Embassy told American citizens to shelter in place. The country's military went on full alert. All of this happened because one man died. His name was Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes. The world knew him as El Mencho. He was 59 years old. He was the founder and leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known by its Spanish initials CJNG, an organization that the FBI considers one of the most powerful criminal enterprises on the planet. The United States government had a $15 million bounty on his head. He had been indicted multiple times in U.S. federal courts. He had evaded capture for over a decade, surviving military operations, rival assassination attempts, and one of the largest manhunts in Mexican history. Before all of that, he was an avocado farmer's son from one of the poorest villages in Michoacán who dropped out of primary school and crossed the U.S. border illegally as a teenager looking for work. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how a boy from the avocado fields of Western Mexico built a criminal organization that operates in more than 40 countries, earns billions of dollars annually, and demonstrated, in the hours after his death, that it could set half a country on fire with a single order. You will also understand what his death means for Mexico, for the drug trade, and for the war that has consumed tens of thousands of lives over the past 2 decades. To understand El Mencho, you have to understand where he came from. And to understand where he came from, you have to understand one crop. Michoacán, in western Mexico, is the avocado capital of the world. The state produces roughly 80% of the avocados imported into the United States. The industry generates billions of dollars annually. Every time you eat guacamole at a restaurant, spread avocado on toast, or drop one into a grocery bag, there is a high probability that fruit grew in Michoacán soil. The land is fertile. The climate is ideal. The mountains are lush. And for decades, the same mountains and rural isolation that make avocado farming productive have also made the region ideal for cultivating opium poppies, marijuana, and operating entirely outside the reach of federal law enforcement. In the villages of Michoacán's Tierra Caliente region, the legal economy and the illegal economy are not separate worlds. They are the same world. The same families that harvest avocados watch cartel convoys pass on the roads outside their farms. The same fields that grow limes and mangoes sit within miles of poppy plantations. The choice between legal work and criminal work is not a moral decision made in the abstract. It is a daily economic calculation made by people with no other options. A farmer who earns a modest living from avocados can triple his income by allowing a cartel to use his land, or he can refuse and risk losing everything, including his life. This was the world Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was born into. He arrived on July 17, 1966, in Aguililla, a small town deep in the mountains of Tierra Caliente. His family was poor. They grew avocados. There was no secondary school worth attending. There was no visible path to professional employment. There was farming, there was leaving, or there was the drug trade. Many families did all three. As a teenager, Oseguera crossed into the United States illegally multiple times, looking for work. He ended up in Northern California, in and around San Francisco. Whatever work he found was not enough, or was not fast enough. His first documented arrest came in 1986, when he was 19 years old. San Francisco police arrested him on drug-related charges. He was released and continued operating in the area. In 1992, he was arrested again, this time for selling heroin directly to undercover officers. He was convicted in U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California on conspiracy to distribute heroin. He received a 5-year sentence and served approximately 3 years in federal prison. After his release, he was deported to Mexico. At that point, the United States government considered him a low-level offender. a small-time heroin dealer from Michoacán who had been processed, sentenced, imprisoned, and removed. Case closed. File archived. Nobody in any U.S. law enforcement agency had any reason to remember his name. That would change. After returning to Mexico, Oseguera did something that makes no sense until you understand what he was actually doing. He became a police officer. He served in municipal police forces in Cabo Corrientes and Tomatlan, small towns in the state of Jalisco. The pay was poor, the work was unglamorous, but the education was priceless. Oseguera learned how police investigations were conducted. He learned how raids were planned. He learned how informants were recruited and managed. He learned the communication systems, the patrol routes, and the blind spots. He was studying the machine from the inside, learning exactly how it worked, so he would know exactly how to break it. How long he served is not fully documented. What is known is that he eventually left the police and entered the drug trafficking world through the Milenio Cartel, a criminal organization based in Michoacán and Jalisco that operated as a satellite of the much larger Sinaloa cartel. Oseguera started at the bottom. He worked as a sicario, a hired killer, protecting senior cartel leadership. He was part of a team of hitmen that guarded Armando Valencia Cornelio, one of the Milenio Cartel's top figures. From that position, he watched. He learned logistics, how drugs moved from production sites to transit points to the U.S. border. He learned finance, how money was laundered, how payments were structured across multiple layers. He learned how territory was held, how rivals were eliminated, and how government officials were corrupted. And he learned the most important lesson of all. The men above him kept getting arrested or killed. Every time one fell, the structure he left behind was available to whoever was bold enough to take it. In 2009, the opportunity arrived. The Milenio Cartel collapsed. Its leader, Oscar Orlando Nava Valencia, was captured by Mexican federal forces. Shortly after, Ignacio Coronel Villarreal, the Sinaloa cartel figure who had protected the Milenio's operations in Jalisco, was killed during a military operation. The power vacuum was immediate and violent. The Milenio fractured into two rival factions. One was called La Resistencia. The other was led by Oseguera. What Oseguera did next revealed a strategic intelligence that nobody in law enforcement had anticipated from a former avocado farmer with a primary school education. His faction initially operated under the name Los Mata Zetas, the Zeta Killers. Los Zetas were a rival cartel that had been terrorizing civilians and businesses across western Mexico through kidnappings, extortion, and indiscriminate violence. They were hated. Oseguera positioned his group not as a new cartel, but as a vigilante army fighting against the Zetas on behalf of ordinary people. His group released videos on social media denouncing the Zetas for extortion and kidnapping. They distributed propaganda presenting themselves as protectors of the community. They called themselves the voice of the people fighting against oppression. It was a calculated lie. The violence Oseguera's group committed was no less severe than that of the Zetas, but the framing worked. Communities that would normally resist or report a new criminal organization tolerated this one because it claimed to be fighting their enemy. By the time people understood what was actually happening, the organization was too powerful to challenge. The group renamed itself the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Oseguera's marriage to Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia, a member of the powerful Valencia crime family with deep roots in Jalisco's criminal underworld, provided him with family connections that solidified his authority and expanded his network. The CJNG was no longer a splinter faction. It was a cartel, and Oseguera was its undisputed leader. What he built over the next 15 years was structurally different from any cartel that had come before. Traditional organizations like the Sinaloa cartel operated on a pyramid. One boss at the top, layers of lieutenants beneath, orders flowing downward. The CJNG operated more like a franchise. Regional cells managed their own territory, their own finances, and their own enforcement, while operating under the CJNG brand and paying a percentage upward. If a regional leader was arrested or killed, the cell continued operating. Someone else took over the franchise. The network did not depend on any single node. It was designed to survive exactly the kind of blow it absorbed 4 days ago. The CJNG did not just traffic drugs. It consumed entire regional economies. In Michoacán, the avocado industry became one of the cartel's most reliable extortion targets. CJNG operatives imposed monthly quotas on avocado farmers, packing house operators, and trucking companies. The payments were not optional. A farmer who refused to pay would find his trucks burned on the highway. A packing house that resisted would find its workers kidnapped or its owner's body left as a message. The cartel that was founded by a boy from the avocado fields was now extorting the families who still worked those same fields. If you are finding this useful for understanding what is actually happening in Mexico right now, subscribing helps us continue producing content like this. These stories take significant time to research and verify from real sources. The avocado extortion was part of a much larger diversification strategy. The CJNG operated fuel theft networks, siphoning gasoline and diesel from government pipelines. It ran human trafficking operations. It operated timeshare fraud schemes, targeting American and Canadian tourists. It laundered money through real estate, restaurants, and shell companies on both sides of the border. The organization had a presence, according to the DEA, in every state of Mexico and in more than 40 countries across the Americas, Europe, Asia, and Africa. The violence that held this empire together was not random. It was performed. Oseguera understood that in the Mexican drug war, violence was not just a tool for eliminating enemies, it was a communication system. Bodies hung from highway overpasses in Jalisco were not just murder, they were billboards. Decapitated heads left in public squares with handwritten messages carved into the torsos were not just acts of cruelty, they were press releases. Every act of public violence carried a specific message to a specific audience. Rival cartels, government officials, potential informants, or communities considering resistance. In one 6-week period in 2015, CJNG gunmen killed 24 police officers in western Mexico. The message was clear: cooperate with operations against us, and you will die. Not in secret, not quietly, publicly, so that every other officer in the region sees what happens. The most shocking demonstration of the CJNG's military capability came on May 1, 2015. Mexican federal forces launched a large-scale operation near Villa Purificación in Jalisco, aiming to capture Oseguera. The military deployed ground troops and helicopter support. As forces closed in, CJNG gunmen were waiting. They had been tipped off. Armed with military-grade weapons, they opened fire on the advancing troops. Then one of them raised a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, aimed at a Mexican military helicopter overhead, and fired. The helicopter went down. 9 soldiers were killed. It was the first time in Mexico's drug war that a cartel had successfully shot down a military aircraft. The message reverberated across the country and beyond. This was not a gang. This was a paramilitary force that could engage the Mexican army and win a tactical engagement. While the military scrambled to respond, CJNG simultaneously launched coordinated retaliatory attacks across Jalisco and neighboring states. Roads were blocked. Vehicles were set on fire. Armed clashes erupted at multiple points. The attacks were not reactive. They were pre-planned. A contingency protocol triggered the moment the military moved on Oseguera. By the time the chaos subsided, Oseguera had vanished into the mountains. He would not be seen again for over a decade. 5 years later, in June 2020, the CJNG demonstrated that it could strike at the highest levels of Mexican government in the most secure city in the country. A convoy of CJNG gunmen ambushed Omar Garcia Harfuch, Mexico City's public security secretary, on one of the capital's main avenues. The attackers used high-caliber rifles and grenades. Harfuch survived with multiple gunshot wounds. 2 of his bodyguards were killed. A civilian bystander, a woman who happened to be on the same street at the wrong moment, was also killed. The assassination attempt was brazen, public, and designed to send a single message: no one is beyond our reach. Throughout this period, Oseguera himself was a ghost. Unlike Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who cultivated a celebrity persona and was featured in magazine interviews and film projects, Oseguera avoided exposure entirely. Almost no recent photographs of him existed. He communicated through intermediaries. He moved constantly between safe houses in the rural mountains of Jalisco, Michoacán, Nayarit, and Colima, protected by bodyguards with military training. His voice was known only from profanity-filled audio recordings leaked on social media, in which he threatened rivals and officials in raw, unfiltered language. The U.S. government raised the reward for information leading to his capture to $15 million in December 2024. Rumors about his health circulated for years. Reports surfaced claiming kidney failure. Rival groups posted messages claiming he had died. None of it was confirmed. The manhunt continued. Then, in February 2026, someone close to him made a mistake. In the days before February 22nd, Mexican military intelligence, supported by the U.S. Joint Interagency Task Force, was tracking a trusted associate connected to one of Oseguera's romantic partners. Not a lieutenant, not a financial operator, a driver. Someone close enough to a woman Oseguera was involved with to be useful, but low profile enough to have avoided suspicion. On February 20th, surveillance data showed this associate transporting the romantic partner to a remote rural property in the mountainous area around Tapalpa, Jalisco. The partner entered the property, met with Oseguera, and later departed. Oseguera stayed. The military did not move immediately. Rushing in would risk alerting the CJNG's extensive surveillance network. Instead, troops were quietly positioned in states adjacent to Jalisco over the next 48 hours, far enough away to avoid detection, close enough to deploy rapidly. On the morning of February 22nd, with Oseguera's presence confirmed, the operation launched. 6 military helicopters, special forces units advancing from multiple directions. As they approached the compound, CJNG gunmen opened fire with high-caliber weapons and heavy armaments. An intense firefight erupted across the mountainous terrain. Several cartel members were killed in the initial exchange. Oseguera did what he had always done. He ran. He fled into the surrounding wooded area with members of his security detail, attempting to disappear into the mountains as he had done in 2015. A special forces team split off from the main assault and pursued him on foot through dense terrain. A second firefight broke out. During the pursuit, one of the military helicopters providing aerial cover was struck by gunfire and forced to make an emergency landing in the nearby town of Sayula. Even in his final moments, the men protecting Oseguera were fighting with enough firepower to bring down aircraft. Oseguera was hit during the second engagement. He was captured alive but gravely wounded. A helicopter was called to transport him to Guadalajara for emergency treatment. 2 wounded cartel bodyguards and 1 injured soldier were loaded alongside him. The helicopter lifted off. Oseguera died in the air. The 2 cartel members also died during the flight. Due to the risk of CJNG retaliation in Guadalajara, the helicopter was diverted to Morelia, where the bodies were transferred to an Air Force plane bound for Mexico City. Mexico's defense secretary confirmed that 8 CJNG members were killed in the operation. 2 more were arrested. Armored vehicles and rocket launchers were seized at the compound. The retaliation was immediate, it was coordinated, and it suggested that the CJNG had a pre-planned protocol for exactly this scenario. What to do the moment their leader fell. A senior CJNG figure identified as El Tuli, described as Oseguera's right-hand man and chief financial operator, reportedly coordinated the response from another location. He offered a bounty of 20,000 pesos, roughly $1,100, for the killing of each member of the military. Within hours, CJNG cells across Mexico activated. Vehicles were hijacked, doused in gasoline, and set ablaze across highways. Convenience stores and gas stations were torched. Armed gunmen established roadblocks in 20 states. Shootouts with security forces erupted in multiple cities simultaneously. Guadalajara shut down. Public transportation was suspended. 5 million residents were ordered to stay home. Schools were canceled. American Airlines, United Airlines, and Air Canada canceled all flights to Puerto Vallarta and Guadalajara. The U.S. Embassy issued shelter-in-place advisories across 5 Mexican states. Later that same day, security forces tracked El Tuli to the town of El Grullo, roughly 180 kilometers southwest of Guadalajara. He attempted to flee and fired on officers. He was killed in the ensuing clash. The killing of El Mencho is the most significant blow against a Mexican cartel since the capture of El Chapo Guzman nearly a decade ago. The White House confirmed that U.S. intelligence supported the operation. Mexico's government has presented the raid as proof that the country can confront the cartels without American troops on Mexican soil. But every analyst who studies Mexican organized crime is asking the same question that has been asked after every major cartel leader has been captured or killed for the past 20 years. Does it matter? Mexico has tried this before. President Felipe Calderón launched a full military offensive against the cartels from 2006 to 2012. Dozens of senior cartel figures were killed or captured during that period. The cartels did not disappear. They fragmented. The fragmentation produced more violence, not less. When one leader fell, 3 rose in his place, each controlling a smaller territory, each fighting the others for dominance. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed or disappeared in Mexico's drug war since that strategy began. The drugs never stopped flowing. The money never stopped moving. When El Chapo was captured, the Sinaloa cartel did not collapse. It split into warring factions that have been fighting a civil war ever since, producing thousands of additional casualties. The CJNG now faces the same crossroads. Oseguera's son, known as El Menchito, is in a U.S. prison. His brother Antonio was extradited to the United States in February 2025. His daughter has been arrested. His wife, from whom he separated in 2018, holds no operational authority. Security analysts have identified 4 or 5 senior commanders who could compete for succession, but none holds the family legitimacy or personal authority that Oseguera maintained for 15 years. The franchise model that made the CJNG resilient may now become its greatest vulnerability. Regional operators who answered to Oseguera now face a choice: accept whoever claims leadership, declare independence, or fight each other. History suggests that all 3 will happen simultaneously. The fundamental economics have not changed. The United States remains the largest consumer market for illegal drugs in the world. The demand for fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamine has not decreased. The precursor chemicals are still arriving at Pacific Coast ports. The distribution networks in all 50 U.S. states are still operational. The money is still flowing through real estate, shell companies, and cryptocurrency. The farmers in Michoacán are still paying extortion fees to whoever shows up to collect them. One man built a criminal organization that spans over 40 countries, earns billions of dollars, and shut down a nation of 130 million people in a single afternoon. The man is gone. The organization remains. The question Mexico and the United States have been unable to answer for 20 years is still the same. You can kill the leader, but how do you kill the system? The roads in Guadalajara have reopened. The fires have been put out. The flights have resumed. The tourists are being told it is safe to return. In Michoacán, the avocado harvest is continuing. The trees still grow. The fruit is still picked. The trucks still roll to the packing houses. The payments are still collected. Somewhere in the mountains of western Mexico, in the same kind of remote compound where Oseguera was found, someone is already deciding what happens next. The cartel is still there. The drugs are still moving. The money is still flowing. And the avocado fields where it all started are still producing for whoever controls them.